Roy, back with another edition of the Ad Podcast. And tonight I'm super excited. I have a really cool guest, Jessica Zall, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Percent. Percent is a fast growing fintech company. They just raised $30 million in their Series B round, I believe. Is that right?
That is right.
Nice, very cool. And they are a really interesting platform that I just really learned a lot about today, where they help accredited investors, family offices, institutional money access private debt, which is an area that has generally only been accessible by the big boys and the big players. So it allows retail investors, if you're accredited, to also participate in this really interesting investment opportunity. And just a cool fintech brand that's bringing together private debt, underwriters, and investors all in one place. Jessica has a storied career inside of fintech, financial marketing, and I'm really excited to talk to her. So Jessica, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, I'd love to start off just with a little bit of your background. I got into a little bit of it, but I think you've had a really exciting career, mainly in the financial sector. But I was also really excited to learn in my research today that you actually started your career as a financial advisor at Fidelity. So you spent a little bit of time behind the firing lines, as they say, actually doing the work of frontline FAs and advising people on products, financial products, and really how to grow their own wealth and investments. And I think that's maybe structured a little bit about how you approach marketing, I'm sure. Do you want to talk a little bit about your career and some of the milestones that led you to your current CMO role with Percent?
Sure, happy to do that. And it's kind of been a very interesting trajectory into marketing because, as you mentioned, I started out in sales, right? And so what I've brought to my marketing career is really thinking like a salesperson, right? Putting myself in the client's shoes, thinking about what their needs are. From a sales perspective, a lot of the work that I did at Fidelity was very consultative, right? So it's very much needs-based analysis. So it's really trying to understand what your customers' pain points are and finding ways of providing value and educating them on things that can solve those challenges, those pain points. And I like I said, I started out at Fidelity, got my licenses, was a broker, junior FA. I was actually getting a little bit disillusioned with that world towards the end of my tenure, my trajectory my tenure at Fidelity, and I actually left and went to grad school. At the time, I was, I think, in my late 20s, I had that mindset of, I want to change the world, right? I want to do something that is giving back to society. And so I decided to go for a master's in public administration with a focus in economics and try and get into the Department of Education and the financing of public education. That was really a big passion to me. At the time of Fidelity, I was on a board for a charter school in Boston that was taking kids that had been marginalized in the public school system and giving them the opportunity to still get their education, but training them in fields, more of
model.
Yeah, trade school. Thank you. The trade school models. So it did a lot of that, and I really became passionate about it. And I had a mentor on the board that said, well, maybe this is something that you want to go into. So I went to grad school. I had a background in, when I went to college, I had a background in psychology, right? And then went into sales at Fidelity, and then went into grad school and focused on economics. So it kind of actually brought everything together for me if you think about it from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, totally. Really understanding human behavior.
Exactly. And it's the behavioral economics. So really brought everything together for me. I was in grad school. at the time of the Great Recession. Once I graduated, it was the Great Recession. And as we all know, the collapse of 2008. And at the time I was interviewing, I had a verbal offer from the Department of Education, and then really everything just went on freeze. And I was in grad school. I had grad school loans. I needed to get a job, and I had temped for a little while, hoping that the job would come through at the DOE. And I really didn't want to go into nonprofit at the very entry level. So I went back to the financial sector. I knew somebody that was running marketing in North America for a a fintech, a SaaS platform for treasury and risk management for the banks, hedge funds, et cetera. It was a world I knew because it was financial services. And coming from Fidelity, again, I speak that language. So she took me in, she really taught me the basics of marketing. And that's kind of where I blossomed. Like I said, it really brought everything together for me from a sales perspective, a psychology perspective, and the economic side of things. And I flourished. I just kind of continued moving up the ranks, going from, small company. I've been at a couple of big companies. Now I'm at a fast growing startup, but it's been exciting. I think for me, having the knowledge of financial services and then having those other areas of education and roles to be able to think like a customer and think like a salesperson has helped.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think one of the things that I read in an interview with you, you had some good, I think, hindsight and vision on kind of the grad school, going to business school and grad school. I think you're very happy that you did, but you might have, if you would have maybe looked back, you might have had Fidelity pay for it instead of you.
Well, that's a great thing that you actually say that, because when I was at Fidelity, I was getting my MBA.
Wow.
I was 2 semesters into my MBA. However, when you are doing it as a full-time job, it takes you 3 years. It doesn't take
right.
3 to 4 years. And so I was getting my MBA there and Fidelity was paying for it. But I was just I was feeling a little disillusioned because my role started to get very, very sales oriented. And I was used to more of a consultative nature. And I am not a salesperson and I didn't fit that mold. And that's when I realized later on that marketing was perfect for me because I really loved what I was doing at Fidelity, but I wasn't the hardcore salesperson. And I was starting to compete with very hardcore salespeople. And that's not my personality. And it's why, again, marketing has been a passion and a sweet spot for me because it allows me to still sell, but give value, because I'm the type of person that likes to make other people happy. I like to give back. And this is, in a way, giving back. Although I know some questions that you're going to ask me down the road are going to turn that head, and we'll get to there.
Totally. So I know I briefly stated what Percent's value prop is, but since what was kind of interesting in doing the research on you today is learning about how a lot of times you almost have to educate people and market the category before you market the brand, really help people understand what is private debt, who normally plays in it, and who is it for, and why do accredited investors now have a opportunity to participate in that market through Percent. So can you talk a little bit just about the value proposition and how the company came to be and where you guys sit in the financial services landscape?
Sure. Value proposition is very, very interesting because it's something that doesn't really exist in terms of what we do. Before I get into the value proposition, just for listeners out there, private credit is a nascent. It's an asset class that has been around for a while, like you said, Dylan. It's very, very new. It's very nascent for retail accredited investors, and it's basically you are giving a loan to a company, right? As opposed to a bank doing it, you're giving a loan, or investors are pulling their money together and giving a loan to somebody and then getting back, that interest. And that interest tends to be at a much higher rate than what you're used to getting through other types of investments. It's a much riskier asset class, of course. And what we've done is we've created the first modern credit marketplace by bringing 3 sides of a private credit transaction together and giving them the platform to transact, right? So investors, think of us as the marketplace and the platform technology. And you have investors, and the investors from a B2C side are going to be your retail accredited investors that want access to this asset class that has historically been available to only, the institutional players, right? That are looking for recurring income, that are looking for higher yield, that don't want maybe the longer durations for other alternative investments like real estate.
And then also, as long as 10 years.
Exactly. Where these can be, they are, the average duration at Percent is about 8 to 9 months for a deal. And sometimes they refinance in, less than 3 months, sometimes a month. So it's giving them access to that. Yeah. Again, it is a risky investment. So
Right,
you
of
have,
course.
one thing that we'll talk about, from educating people about what they're investing in. But those investors, right, as well as institutional investors, funds, family offices, RIAs. So giving them access to these investments and giving them an online access, right? So it's, pretty simple. You sign up for a free account, you verify yourself as an accredited investor. Once you're an accredited investor, you're in, and you can look at you can get the data room and get into the data and the deals, the data about the deals, and really do your own research and due diligence to see if it's right for you. And then obviously, invest, et cetera. So that's the one side. The second side is the borrower. So in order to create the deal, you need a company that wants that loan, a company that needs to raise cash, right, in order to keep their business, either keep their business going between equity fundraising rounds, or some of the companies on our platform are fintech lenders, right? That this is the way that they raise their capital in order to lend out to their individual lenders. And then you have to have an underwriter, right? Somebody has to actually structure this transaction. So we actually have an underwriting product that allows underwriters to come on, find borrowers, find investors, create the deal. And it's really just bringing all three players together, giving them the pipes to get it done.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think you've also mentioned that this is the first role in which you are truly in a B2B2C marketing role, where you have definitely the B2B components of needing to recruit underwriters and deal flow from the companies that need access to this type of capital. But most importantly, you also need access to capital, which comes through the form of accredited investors. But it sounds like a lot of those investors are also family offices that might be putting in, millions versus hundreds of thousands or something like that. So can you talk a little bit of some of the challenges that you faced or the excitement around doing that B2B2C role in fintech?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge for us has been at the corporate level, right? And trying to have a message that brings your brand to life, that is understood by all three sides, right? Because an underwriter comes to you for one thing, a borrower comes to you for another thing, and an investor comes to you for a third thing. And you need to figure out when is that time as well to be marketing your corporate brand versus going after each one of the audiences, right? Because what you say to investor is not going to be the same as borrower or underwriter. So a challenge for us has been making sure that we're at the stage of we really need to prime the pump with investors, right, for the marketplace to attract the right borrowers and the right underwriters, right? And the right underwriters and borrowers, they're going to be more attracted to the corporate brand, right? But it's making sure that we're not alienating the retail accredited investors. If you look at our homepage, percent.com, it's very much geared to retail accredited investors. We've started to make slight tweaks for the B2B side in terms of the institutional family, like the family offices, funds, RIAs, et cetera, but is very much geared towards your retail accredited investor. That's because that is the main way that we capture those people, right?
Wow.
You're not dealing with salespeople on the B2C side. You've got to make, marketing is your sales engine. So you have to make sure that that is fully messaged or appropriately messaged to that individual investor. So that's been a challenge for us.
They have to essentially be able to go through the B2C side unaided by a salesperson. So it's really kind of, imagine a long sales process of nurturing and education and, things that can kind of push them down the qualifying funnel, I would imagine.
Yep. And I saw somebody just ask what the URL is. It's www.percent.com. And Perfect. If you look, you'll see, like, again, the homepage, very retail, but you'll also see there's other, in the top nav, there's other components to it for borrowers, for underwriters.
Yeah, I think you mentioned you guys do a lot of landing page stuff for those more specific B2B audiences, kind of.
Yeah. And that's obviously, that's a different type of, B2B and B2C are very different, but they're also similar, right, in certain respects. But for what we're doing, you need to have a sales team, right? And you need to be creating that awareness, intent, getting them down the pipeline and getting them over to salespeople. On the B2C side for us, it's much quicker, right? Of getting them right to signing up and learning more. So that homepage has to be able to quickly capture those pain points right away.
Yeah, no, I love that. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the challenges in finding accredited investors? And for those of you that don't know what accredited investors means, it basically varies a little bit from state to state, but mainly it's net worth of $1 million or combined household income of $250,000 a year. It's basically the qualification that allows you to participate in alternative and investment deals. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges in finding those types of folks, because they're highly sought after by companies like yours, but are also being competed for by the entirety of the alternative investment ecosystem, whether that's crowdfunding companies that are dealing with real estate or fine art or other platforms that are doing other things outside of your specific niche. So can you talk a little bit about those challenges? Because I've tried to work with some other clients in this space, and it's a very elusive, hard to find audience.
It has been so challenging. We've really gotten it down to a science, though.
Wow.
For me, it's been about hiring the right people, right?
Yeah.
Hiring the right performance and growth marketer that the right team that understands really how to ensure a good CAC, especially at a startup. Your boards are going to be very, very focused on those customer acquisition costs, and we've gotten ours down to a very, very attractive number. Where I know, in speaking to other platforms that quote unquote compete with us, because I can't say compete really, because nobody does exactly what we do, but there are plenty of other players that are competing for those retail accredited investors, and some of them are spending upwards of $4,000 are spending millions of dollars and have a $4,000 CAC, which is absolutely outrageous. So it's a race to the bottom, and with these accredited investors, because everybody is competing for them. So the challenges that we've really had around that, again, has been operating with a small budget, right? We want to be very careful with the funding that we have. And we've seen a lot of other platforms just throw this money, and they may get a good number of signups, but are they accredited? And are they, how loyal are they to you, and how much are they going to invest with you, right? So we don't just want to pay for signups. They have to actually go through the accreditation process. And you got to do a lot of digging in terms of what are the publications out there that have a high proportion of accredited investors. So it's getting the right technology for us, right? Identifying the right technology that helps us identify those potential affiliates or potential, direct buy newsletters. Understanding what the prices are, right? Negotiating those down, testing them out. We've done a lot of testing that hasn't necessarily given us what we would have expected, but it's growth hacking, right? It's growth hacking 101, and it's trying to figure out what is going to work. But the biggest challenge has been the spend. It's been the cost it takes to acquire them, and having really, really strict guidelines of who we will do business with and what we will pay, and negotiating them down to the lowest that we can go. And I don't know if a lot of companies really do that. Like, I would hope that they do, but I also see some of I also see some of what they're spending. We don't spend near that. Granted, we're not acquiring on as high level as they are, right? But again, I don't know where they are right now necessarily in terms of their own funding and their own revenue. We're trying to do it in a very, very smart way, which is a slower process. It's not that explosive growth.
That makes sense. Well, in this environment, probably more than ever, you need to be a good steward of your marketing budget and not just go out and, get big fast at any cost, right? You need to do it in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah. So, and you see companies that have had explosive growth that are now really struggling.
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. Well, I want to talk to a couple of things that you have done that I think are really interesting. So I wanted to talk a little bit around LinkedIn, which you went in depth in another interview. So it sounds like LinkedIn Organic has been a really good place for you. And I think you've had a really good mindset in how to approach LinkedIn, not just talking about yourself, but celebrating, other partners in the ecosystem, publications that you're working for. I think you doubled the size of your LinkedIn following, which is becoming more important than ever as a social media platform. LinkedIn now having 100 million users and really being an ecosystem where creators and content, it's becoming more of a social platform than ever. So can you talk a little bit about your LinkedIn strategy and why you think it's been successful for you?
So our LinkedIn strategy is really just to amplify. We're not really doing any paid at all. We were trying out some paid. It's all organic, and it's amplification of our message. And it's encouraging our employees, our VCs, our partners to continue to expand that message. It's all about virality, but it's also about education. And this also kind of ties into what we just talked about in terms of some of the challenges, right? One of the challenges from an advertising perspective is educating people, right? And it's about your message, right? And not necessarily capturing them with, you know, clickbaity kind of stuff, but educating them about what private credit is, because you're starting to see it in the news everywhere. So LinkedIn, we're using that to educate people about private credit. Much more education, much more brand building than it is, sales, pushing sales at all. And a lot of what we've done has really helped us from a PR perspective, because you see, if you read Bloomberg, if you read, the Journal, the Times, et cetera, at least once a week, somebody is writing something about private credit, because it has been, I want to say last December, a year ago, it really started to boom, right? And it was a challenge for us before that because it wasn't being talked about. And now that it's being talked about constantly, you can ride that wave. So constantly using LinkedIn to tag those publications, tag the journalists, and provide education to your followers. That not only helps us get in touch, put ourselves in front of the publication, but also put ourselves in front of the journalists, right? So that they then understand and see what percent is. And we do that for our president and our CEO as well. So that they have those connections to the journalists, they will follow them, and they'll start to see, percent is a player in this market. And we usually do that at least 2 times a week, sometimes 3. And again, it's usually tapping into what is out there. Starts to build those relationships with the journalists, build those relationships with the publications, build those relationships with people that are quoted in these articles. There are people from Apollo, from Churchill, et cetera, and educate people. And then we get in front of their audience as well, and that helps increase our followers.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, being able to double your follower size since you came on board is pretty impressive. So,
and all organic, no paid.
Wow.
It's tiny little bit paid, but the paid stuff was for the B2B side. So
yeah, the paid stuff is very expensive on LinkedIn, but they're getting better, and they're continuing to roll out new features, which I think are pretty exciting. Like there's the new thought leader post where you can actually boost posts from your employees versus just your corporate account. So I think that will start to create some new opportunities for the paid and the organic side to work together. On that note, you hit a little bit of it in your last answer, but how do you create a culture of sharing on LinkedIn throughout your teams, your VCs, your centers of influence? So many companies struggle with getting their employees to share stuff on LinkedIn because they're either shy or they feel like, what's in it for me? My company doesn't own my LinkedIn page. That's where my resume lives in case I want to get recruited for another job. And we've even noticed it in our agency that we had to kind of shift mindsets to get people to think about, hey, this is not only good for the company, it's good for your personal brand. Let's empower you to create great content in the mode that, this podcast is very much an expression of that. I have 28,000 followers on LinkedIn because my CEO encouraged me to find a way to engage with my following on LinkedIn. And I do it through a podcast because that's the way I'm most comfortable communicating. But I hate writing LinkedIn posts, like typing out LinkedIn posts or blog posts. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how you've created a culture of sharing on LinkedIn inside of Percent?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to. I think the first thing before anything else is really educating your internal audience, right? Of what is marketing and what marketing does and how it helps.
Mm,
So before we even kind of put this content in front of people, we actually have a monthly marketing meeting which we started back in, I think we started it last December maybe, and we use it to really educate again that marketing is an art and a science. It's designed not just to be brand, PR, etc., but to actually drive sales. We get people really involved in the growth, the numbers, in terms of everything that marketing is doing from a revenue perspective, all of the various tactics, et cetera. And that's where we start to educate them about the power of virality and the power of brand and the power of thought leadership and the power of PR. So first, it really is just to educate people, right? Forget sharing on LinkedIn, but make sure your company, that your internal employees that may never have been exposed to a marketing group at all,
yeah.
or had the ability to have education, make sure they actually understand what it is that you're doing and why these things are important. Because when you just say, hey, share this, you're not really helping anybody understand, well, why is this important? So actually
Mm,
saying, when you do this, we'll help you create a post, we'll help give you the link. All you have to do is share, comment, or you can post it on your own, right? Here's the content, here's the link, just go out there. It gets in front of their people, their own audience, and it helps build the brand. Because when you're in a startup, everybody is committed to and invested in that brand, and our options in the company mean something, right?
yeah,
And we need to
good
work
point.
as we can so that those mean something in the long term. So helping people understand why they're doing it has really been successful for us. Getting people involved, because my biggest thing to people is marketing is not a silo. It's not just one part of the organization. It's absolutely every part of the organization and every part of the customer life cycle. So that's really helped people. And how we get that out there is every time we do a social post, you have the links and the copy and the image that goes out over Slack, right after it happens, encouraging people. We go on LinkedIn. The person that does our LinkedIn on the team hits share with employees, so they get it that way. So they get it Slack, they get it through LinkedIn, which goes to their email. And then every Monday morning, we have a weekly internal newsletter. And at the bottom of that newsletter, there's all the social posts for for that past week, with language around why we ask them to share. So it's all about education.
I love that. Yeah, it's one thing to just kind of feel like you're nagging people and maybe even taking advantage of their social platform, but the idea of education and talking about why it's not only important for the company, everybody's invested in the success, not just because it's part of your job responsibility, but because you've got equity and, a successful outcome. And yeah, we did the same thing. We brought in a LinkedIn brand consultant to come into our weekly Monday morning meeting, and he walked us through, best practices and growth hacks, and really gave us a top-down, bottom-up, kind of a LinkedIn 101 tutorial for our entire organization. And it really, I think, opened up a lot of people's eyes to why LinkedIn is important for the company's success, but also important for your own long-term success and career. So I love that idea around education.
And then the other thing to add too is in these monthly meetings, we're able to actually tie it back to the progress, right? Because you can show by doing this, we've increased, our LinkedIn followers by X percentage. And these people actually, I'm giving hypotheticals here, but this percentage actually signed up and this is the revenue they drove, right?
Wow.
So by tying that back, they can see the power of, what they do.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I want to talk about another category, which is influencer marketing, which is the space that I'm in. And we've noticed, that generally regulated industries are generally the last to kind of engage in a new channel, right? Something like influencer marketing's been around for a minute, but last year was definitely the year of finance. At least at our agency, we had several finance clients come into the agency. what have you guys been thinking about from an influencer marketing perspective? Is it something that you guys have tapped into at all, especially around the leveraging of LinkedIn as a social platform? Is that something you guys have done yet?
So we tapped into it a tiny bit, and I'll tell you about that. We've since pulled back on it because we just became a regulated broker dealer under
Yep.
as of, I think it was August, I think it was. So we've really had to dial back certain things until FINRA goes through and decides, kind of decides whether or not this is something that firms should be doing. And I've noticed a lot of other platforms are doing it that recently became broker dealers too. And I think you're going to start to see them scale back because they had not necessarily been following, they were kind of moving along and hadn't gotten to the FINRA review process. So it might actually pull back a little bit from what you may have seen like a year ago. But we started dabbling in it. Mainly we started with a couple of our investors that have invested on the side in our Series B that are, and I don't want to necessarily state their names in a podcast.
Yeah.
They may have their own publications, right, that have advertising, et cetera, where in those publications, we actually do pay for advertising in some of those publications, but they will tweet or post on LinkedIn or write about us in those publications, which is a bit of influencer marketing.
Yeah, totally.
It's not the true influencer marketing where we're paying somebody, $50,000 to go do XYZ, which again, a lot of firms that are BDs or that are BDs now, but maybe, had just gone through it, were doing, and then people that aren't broker dealers that are still doing it with football players, et cetera. How do I feel about it? I think it needs to be done very, very, very carefully.
Right.
In this industry. This is, these are alternative assets, right? You saw a lot of this with crypto, right?
Yeah, kind of went crazy there.
Brady with Kim Kardashian, they're not, alternative. They don't have jobs in alternative investments, right?
Yeah.
And you really need to know that these are risky. You can lose money. You have to, you have to do your due diligence. You have to say, I have this money. I want to try this out. I'm going to do the due diligence. You need to know how to understand how it works before you invest in it. And for me, we've only dabbled in it, held back on it, and it's been with somebody who particularly knows this space.
Yeah, somebody that has credibility.
And we're not paying them to do it either. Yeah. So it's that free influencer marketing. When it comes to paying people, I'm very, very hesitant to advise any company to do that right now with everything that you've seen from a crypto perspective. And I think at the end of the day, companies, you want to care about your existing clients. So you want to care about any client. I mean, unfortunately, it is capitalistic America. And so we know that not all companies care about people. Right. But if you want to have a long-lasting brand, you have to build trust. You have to build credibility. And I don't necessarily think right now in this market and in this space, influencers, are it.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective. Yeah, and I think, so much of what we're seeing in the quote unquote B2B influencer marketing is less of like, hey, buy this, particular item. It's not that. It's more of like co-creation, right? Like finding people that have influential social followings, inviting them to events, inviting them to be on your podcast or in your content. And like you were talking about before, creating education and value for the consumer that they see as, added value and not marketing. I think is an interesting way for the B2B side to play there, that you're not doing that traditional celebrity endorsement, but you're more working with trusted authorities and sources that can be, that you can lend some brand equity, but are helping educate people that, these are opportunities, but there's risk in alternative investments.
Yeah. So that is one thing that we will probably start to try, is identifying those people that are subject matter experts in the alternative space to be able to talk about and educate about private credit and not necessarily represent your brand.
Yeah, I think that's great. So one thing that I saw you guys do that I thought was really outside of the box and super cool is that you guys are sponsoring pickleball. So as a player, I was really thrilled to see this integration and think it's a really a bold move for you. Can you talk a little bit about, what attracted you to pickleball and why you decided to get involved with it?
Great question. It was the fact that, number one, you're trying to go after retail accredited investors, and retail accredited investors are wealthier investors. They tend to be at, sailing events, yachting events, golf events, tennis events, which cost a lot of money. We were watching some of our quote unquote competitors, folks that are in the alternative investment space, that were advertising at the US Open or various golf events. And we're a small company and we don't have this huge B2C budget. It's a lot bigger than a B2B budget, but it's still very small. Somebody had mentioned to me that I was talking to, I said, have you ever thought about pickleball? Nobody's doing advertising. They're just starting to come out with tournaments. And I thought, oh, this is a great idea. So we did some research on, tri-state area. We're in New York City, tri-state area pickleball tournaments, and they really didn't have any sponsors. And so we were able to get really low cost sponsorship and help build the brand that way. And we actually sent people there as well. There's still, it's still a very, pickleball is gotten really popular, but the tournament, the tournament, whatever you call it, like the setup, the field is still small. There's not a whole heck of a lot of tournaments.
Yeah,
So
right.
they're probably very inexpensive right now. My guess is it's going to be just continue to grow, and they're going to become a lot more expensive, like golf tournaments in the US Open. So we just wanted to try getting onto that and seeing if it helped drive, signups. I'll be honest with you, it didn't necessarily help drive signups. It was a fun thing to do. I think there's probably more that we need to do around that. With a decent budget, and we are trying to be very, very careful with our budget in 2024 with everything going on in the market. So we're not, spending frivolously, and I think people need to be careful with that. But if we have money to play around, I would love to do that again, because those are the right audience, or that is the right audience, right? They generally have, at least 75% of accredited investors, most of them.
Wow. That's great.
A lot of them are, retired 55 year and up. And in the tri-state area, a lot of them are coming from Connecticut, New Jersey, et cetera. And it's the right, part of it's the right audience for us. So it's just making sure that it is the right time, the right cost, and you have the right plan there.
Yeah, really cool. Well, bravo for making that leap and trying something exciting and innovative.
Yep.
So I'm going to pivot a little away from your work at Percent and just kind of get into some more general questions around your marketing and your management philosophy. I read an article in which you told a story about when you were younger and you had a friend in school, and you both kind of learned differently about money based on how your parents doled out your allowance. You got your allowance in a lump sum and kind of spent it on what you wanted, and then your friend, I think, kind of had the envelope strategy where she had some put away for clothes and some for fun things, and really kind of a strategy to kind of teach her about budgeting, essentially. Can you talk a little bit about how your early exposure to money and just the idea of your relationship with money maybe attracted you to the financial marketing world?
Oh, that's a great question too. You're hitting me with some good questions. I think it's funny because after college, like I just kind of landed at Fidelity, to be honest with you, right?
Wow.
I went
Sometimes it works out that way.
Exactly. I needed to get a job, and back in college, I started out as a neurobiology major because, believe it or not, I actually wanted to be a forensic psychiatrist. I saw Silence of the Lambs and Jodie Foster, and I said, I want to do that, and got to college and got into a couple of classes my second year and realized I can't stand the sight of blood. So forget that. I went into psychology. So I landed at Fidelity, really. wasn't necessarily attracted to finance per se. And I liked Fidelity because I really got to consult and educate people. So I think it was more like that. But I think too, as time has gone on, there probably is a correlation to a degree in terms of, I love my parents. They were great. They raised my sister and I very, very well. They probably didn't teach us, proper budgeting, as my friend Kieran had with her envelopes, because her father was in the military, so he was very strict, and she's an accountant now, so that's a perfect job for her. Probably
Right.
tied me into it to a degree, in terms of, I guess, helping educate people, helping people understand, what their dollar means, because I didn't, right? And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably still learning what my, what my dollar means. But I think where you're going to is just the importance of financial literacy, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, totally. And that's, I know you've done some work and volunteering, and that was another quote that I had read, that you really believe that we should teach
Mhm.
financial literacy to kids at a young age, potentially through gamifying the process. I try and do it with my daughters to some degree of success. Just trying, like, what I love that I think I've instilled in my daughters is they're very entrepreneurial. So they'll make bracelets and do the Christmas fair at school. My daughter has actually executed 2 successful influencer marketing deals. So she's actually helped me out at the company, reaching out to influencers on Instagram all on her own.
That's amazing.
She's only 10 years old. So I think I've been able to instill the entrepreneurial part, but maybe not so much the saving and how you grow money part just yet. I'm still a work in progress there.
They got time. They got time.
Can you talk a little bit about, why you feel it's important that we teach financial literacy to kids at a young
I
age?
think the biggest thing is I wasn't taught that. And I really, really wish I was. I kick myself after grad school because, like we talked about, it's better to have a company pay for grad school for you, because it is very expensive here in the US. And I didn't have budgeting classes. And it's hard for parents to teach their kids everything, right? Being a parent, I'm not a parent, but I see my friends and I see my sister parenting her child, and it is exhausting and it is a lot of work. And I really feel, in order to make our youth, our children successful, budgeting and being able to live within your means is absolutely instrumental. And I don't know if there are a lot of games out there or anything, any apps that help children learn this. But we all know that, kids are addicted to their phones. This would be like a perfect, win-win for everybody, is to have something like that and teach it in your schools now, right? Teach it in the schools as well. I know I've talked to some parents that, they've got, there are some schools that may have something in their math classes that helps kids with budgeting, but I'm just passionate about it because you look at, the amount of credit card debt that people have in this country. You look at, I know one of your questions that you were going to ask me was about, uh, you know, marketing and, being aware of marketing, because it's constantly selling you stuff and people buy into these things, right? And they spend way above their means. And it's been something that I've been passionate about for a while, mainly again because I did not get that, and I see how people live paycheck to paycheck and struggle with credit card debt, struggle with grad school loans, and it's about budgeting 101.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's all about how do you live within your means and figure it, it's important you just figure out a system, right? Some people don't have the luxury of saving a huge amount, but just coming up with a budget that you can live within and putting that little bit aside each month or whatever, to whether it's 10% or 5%, at least to start getting that snowball going.
Exactly.
So, I also have seen that you're a marathon
Mhm.
runner. I haven't quite made it to marathon status. I've done a half before, but I do. Yeah, totally. No, it's fun. Yeah, it's a great. Runner's high is probably one of the best feelings that I'm aware of on the earth. Um, Do you feel like you're able to use that time to brainstorm and be creative? I definitely find that I get some of my best ideas when I'm on runs. Have you been able to kind of harness that and create some space for you to be creative in your runs?
Yeah, that's usually my time where I zen out and I let my mind open to.
Wow.
And it's funny because I remember one person I worked with many years ago said, "My glass of wine at night, after a glass of wine at night, that's when I'm creative." And I always thought, you know what? When I go for my run at night, that's when I'm creative. That's when I just let my mind open up and I start to think about everything. I
Wow.
can't think
So
of
cool.
any specific examples that I may have come up with. Actually, there's probably one. I think I came up with this on a run because, again, usually when I'm running, I'm either zenning out or thinking about work, right? And thinking about work from a creative perspective, not obsessing about it, but letting my mind be really, really open because, generally during the workday, I'm leading and being the chess master and strategist and I'm in back-to-back meetings. So that's my time to just open up. But coming up with ideas like we recently launched, Percent recently launched an inaugural private credit report that worked with a company that's owned by S&P called Coalition Greenwich that surveyed a number of institutional investors to understand what they were thinking about from a private credit perspective to help give education to other institutional investors as well as the retail audience about private credit. So thinking
Yeah.
about things that can try and move the needle, or how can you be as creative as possible with your messaging while still operating in the confines of, FINRA and being a broker dealer.
Yeah, no, I love that. I find, on my runs, I'm not in front of a computer, so I can't really do anything. But then, just leaving that space open to think and brainstorm and hopefully remember the ideas by the time I get home. Sometimes I'll stop and jot a note, but I like to try not to
And
stop.
one
But
good thing with running too is when you're running behind people that have really interesting messaging on the back of their shirts. I helped me come up with a tagline once now that I think about it. For a
yeah,
JP Morgan corporate challenge race, I saw a really cool tagline somewhere that I then switched up and incorporated for our JP Morgan corporate challenge logo or our tagline.
yeah, I love that. And another thing for me is, international travel. Like I was once in Barcelona with Adobe, and my clients were busy doing something, so I decided to go out on a 2-hour run through the town. And I would have never seen that much of Barcelona, walking around or on a tour or something like that. But I, made it maybe 6 or 7 miles round trip.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's a great way to see places, when you're traveling too.
100%.
So. Nice. Well, I want to tap into a quote that I think I've heard you mention several times, which I think is pretty innovative and pretty bold. You mentioned that marketing is stealing someone's time, so you must add value. Can you talk a little bit about this? I'd like to think that we're asking permission for their time, but this is a bolder way of framing it, and I really think it's important that we keep in mind that our marketing is, there's the only resource we can't get any more of is time.
Exactly. So yeah, stealing people's time is maybe a little bit negative, but it really gets the point across because I think about it. I'm a person with so much energy and I'm constantly on the go, right? And there's constantly things being thrown in my face, right? Like I'm looking at ads on, I'm reading the news on my phone and ads are popping up. I'm watching the TV, I'm listening to Spotify or Pandora, whatever it is, or watching a YouTube video or looking at the mail. And there's constantly messages in front of me to sell me things, right? And so that's really stealing my time, right? If you think about it, we are at the mercy now of social media and email and a constant barrage of sales messages. And it really got me to thinking that you're just stealing my time. What are you giving me, right? And I take this approach with marketing, especially with Percent, because we want to provide value. We want to educate you. And this is also very important from a B2B perspective, is educating your audience first and foremost, giving them value. Because what does that do? That builds credibility in you as a brand. It shows you as a subject matter expert. Well, people will remember that. If you're giving them value, something that that either gets them to think or tells them something that they don't, that they didn't know, that they didn't know was there, helps really create, create value for you as a brand to get them then down into that sales life cycle. Because you haven't hit them with a sales message. You've hit them with, hey, this is going on in the industry. These things have been happening, blah, 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 blah. And creating the awareness around you as a brand. And then again, getting them to opt in from there. And then they can start to see, oh, okay, this is the solution. This is how it's helped other clients like me. Here's the product. Let me do a demo, etc. So it's really about educating and providing value. If you're going to take time from me, I do want something in return.
Yeah, no, I love that. And sometimes, adding value is just making somebody laugh. I noticed today when I was doing the research around you, you had appeared on this podcast called like Marketers from Mars or something like that. And you guys between segments were taking shots of hot sauce in a B2B marketing podcast. I just thought it was so out there. I literally laughed out loud, like probably 10 times. And I watched several interviews of you today, and that's the one that stands out because it was funny. And I engaged in the comments probably 4 or 5 times when I watched the videos. It made it so much more fun because it just made me laugh, and it took me out of my, what can be sometimes boring when you're doing more B2B style research. It feels so stodgy and professional, and to have something that felt kind of just fun and lighthearted was really, really neat.
That's actually a great point that you make too. And we did something at, I can't remember if this was when we were at Thomson Reuters or my company, Thomson Reuters, rebranded to Refinitiv. We spun off, and it was either Thomson Reuters or Refinitiv that we launched gamification for commodities trading. And it's providing value because it's actually helping you find, data, but it's fun at the same time, taking away the normal, doldrums of your job, right? And giving you some fun to actually get your job done. So that's a great point.
Yeah, love that. So, something else that I noticed, you are a member of Chief, which several members of the podcast that I've interviewed are members of Chief, which is a women's networking executive group. You've been involved in several nonprofits and organizations and boards around women empowerment in the workplace. Can you talk a little bit about your experience within those organizations, and why is it important for you to be a part of them, and why would you encourage other women to be involved in that?
Sure. So I've been a member of Chief probably for about, I think it was 2019. So what is that? Almost 4 years, 3.5 years, probably. 3.5 years. I think it's very important, just for anybody, women, men, anybody, to get involved in organizations that help them both network, learn, and nurture the next generation of, in this case, marketers, right? Or next generation of employees. For me, being a part of these women's network has really been just that, is giving up and coming women in the financial services, fintech, or marketing arena the support they need in order to rise, the education, the training, the mentorship, and also just the networking for them and getting the experience, the exposure to other roles, to more senior people, to help them navigate, their path. So I think that, that has been important to me. A lot of it for me too is networking and education, and how I can continue to grow myself and learn from a marketing perspective, because it's hard when you get to a certain level. You're used to having teams that get stuff done, right? And you kind of forget some of the basics, right? You kind of forget some of the building blocks that go into play when you have these bigger teams, which is actually why I went back to startup, believe it or not, from big company. But a lot of those organizations just continue to help me learn and grow.
Yeah, and I imagine having perspective to colleagues that are outside of your category might give you opportunities to challenge ideas. We can get very myopic when we're focused on one brand, one challenge, one vertical. and then hearing what maybe retail or entertainment or other categories you're up to might be valuable. Right?
That actually helped me recently because again, my experience has been B2B. It has not been B2C. So joining Percent was a challenge for me. It was it was one of the reasons why I joined Percent too, is because I haven't really had this exposure to B2C like this. I've dealt with financial advisors, RIAs. I've dealt with wealthy people from a bit, but not from a B2C perspective like this. So it was a good challenge, and I used my network to bounce ideas off of in terms of growth hacking tactics of what could be what might work for retail accredited investors, and also to make sure, is a strategy that I put in place, is this going to resonate with a retail accredited investor audience or just a B2C audience? So that network actually helped me. And actually, one of them was one of those people was the one that suggested pickleball, who had mentioned pickleball.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that totally makes sense. Really a smart idea from outside. No, that's cool. All right. Well, we're headed down to the final question here. So what has you most excited about your future?
Oh, let's see. There's a bunch of things for this. I mean, first and foremost, I'm excited to see where Percent goes. It's we're about 4 or 5 years old now, gone through Series B. It's a crazy market for startups. I'm excited to see the future of this company. And it's a very unique value proposition. It's a challenging market, getting it through this market and really seeing it become a teenager, an adult, etc. So that's very, very exciting. On a different note, from a marketing perspective, I'm really excited to see where AI goes. ChatGPT, DALL-E, I'm going to tell you, coming from a startup, those things have been instrumental to my team and I to get stuff done. And there's a bunch of challenges with them. There's this, you gotta make sure that you're really looking at the stuff that comes out and tweaking it, not taking it for what it is. But those things have really helped us get more stuff done and reduce our time getting stuff done. And that's essential in a startup, and then a startup for B2C as well, right? So I'm really excited to see where that takes off, or how that takes off.
Yeah. I saw a demo of an AI platform that helps you identify influencers today, which is the first time I've seen like true AI in action in my industry, and it was pretty eye-opening, the things that it can help accomplish.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, just the biggest time constraint for our industry is, how do you find the right influencers when you're looking at millions and millions of potential people to partner with? So anything that can help take all the data points and bring them into one centralized location and allow you to really overlay, right brand, right creative, right influencer, right message. I think that's going to, shorten, not take away from the heavy hand-to-hand combat of like actually doing the work. And so many people are afraid that AI is going to take our jobs. I just think AI is going to allow us to do the boring parts faster.
I agree.
And take the things that are monotonous and tedious out of our everyday lives. So I embrace it fully too.
I agree. I 100% agree.
Yeah, so cool. Well, Jessica, this has been such a pleasure. I had an absolute amazing time today doing the research on you, and the conversation was even that much more exciting. So thank you for spending some time today with us and our audience. I really appreciate you. Everybody who's watching at home, if you got value from listening to this conversation with us today, don't forget to subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening through a podcast platform. And if you decide to rate the show and give us 5 stars, it allows us to help find a larger audience. And most importantly, if you have a marketer in your network that would get value from my conversation with Jessica today, don't forget to share this and send it along. So that being said, Jessica, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, and
wonderful
speaking with you. Yes, let's stay in touch. Wonderful speaking with you.
You too. Bye-bye.